Big Brother might be watching. I actually think for a lot of people, they would feel better if they felt like Big Brother was watching. I think it might be a sign that someone cares or cares about them. There's an idea if you don't have anyone, then where do you seek your belonging? Where do you seek what you need in the world? But anyway, I'm beginning today, continuing on with where I left off. I said I'd be talking about wellness and well-being, and there's no talking about that outside of our already existing environment and people, right? I'm not talking about what's theoretical. I'm talking about what's possible and then what is possible beyond what is known, right? Because the whole idea of knowing is that there's some sort of finality to it. Yet the whole human endeavor has been to continue to learn and to refute what we think we know. And anyway, in terms of what I've been talking about with America, our way of life, the corporation state, the powerful entities and groups, and the nature of class and system in America. Um, the other day, instead of writing a script, I just kind of did some impromptu riffing in the moment. So I recorded a few minute long script here, and we're going to go ahead and listen. And this will be the basis upon which everything else is built. So the truth of the matter is people here are conditioned to believe that they are what they have. This is why Americans for a long time standing kill themselves when the ledger reads zero. Right. So when we were in school, we were taught about the Great Depression, for instance. And during the Great Depression, a lot of money disappeared. The value of the dollar went down to nothing or less than nothing, let's say. So when that happened, a lot of people whose entire identity and way of life was wrapped up in these ledgers, which turns out were wrong, right? And you could say, well, no, but the ledgers read what they read. And it's like, yeah, they read what they read, but it turns out the numbers weren't real. And when that reality became apparent, a lot of these people supposedly jumped out of buildings and killed themselves. Why? Because their whole identity and value is wrapped up in having. So again, when the ledger reads zero, they kill themselves. Like they can't have any other value or substance as a human being, right? What prompts such behavior? Let's keep going though. They lose all their money. They have to go bankrupt, right? They kill themselves because when they have zero, they are zero. This is to have no value as a human being. This is to be completely disconnected from history and life and reality, to just value yourself in terms of assets and paper money as if the value isn't oneself, the one who can generate and go after these things or whatever, however you. Right. It's common that, well, it's not common. Rather, what you'll see in common with anyone who does anything worthwhile is that it's a long, hard road. They have failures, they have mistakes, they might have bankruptcies, they might lose many times before they win big time. And I don't just mean like, playing the slot machine. I mean, in terms of the kind of creativity and ingenuity and also like social awareness and social ability they demonstrate in life to consistently reinvent themselves, their business, whatever it is they're trying to do to succeed, right? It's a common thing we see with both individuals and groups, that the ability to change your image, the ability to get back up after being knocked down. And I know there's a difference between, for those who feel like they're trying to get back up after getting knocked down and those who feel like they're trying to raise themselves from the dead, right? There's a big difference in terms of what that looks like, but I'm going to get into that. So I'm going to hit play. I want to conceive of it because even that seems like a pretty low resolution idea or ideal. But I'm trying to paint a picture here. There's a huge difference in types of people and type modes of being, you could say. And the idea of having, right, that if you have more, you are more, that if you have more, you're going to press more, and you can see this in how incapable Americans are of having relationships, because unless the other person has a lot and a lot to give and they give it freely, then Americans generally want to say no. Like, they have no idea what it is to actually have a family or build a family. And a lot of these people, like, they don't have kids. They haven't had like serious long term. And I'm not trying to make fun of anyone. I'm not trying to rub anything in. I'm saying that, the actual, all right, let me frame it like this. America primarily is a nation of C students. It's a nation of average people, right? Working people. That's fine. When you come from the middle class or the bottom, that's just, that's our way of life. So when it comes to certain people, they're raised in a certain class, yet they have, it's like they were raised to believe that everyone's going to be new money, right? Because there's big differences between old money and new money. So in the case of people in relationships, they don't understand what it means to actually enjoin on the, I don't want to say work because that makes it sound like something that it's not. I mean, they don't know what it's like to commit and to trust and to build in a way that only a family can, only in a way that two individuals can when they come together, rather than saying, you know what, I expect you to have everything done and then I'm just going to go along for the ride, right? That's called wanting a free ride. And as I said in the last video, the biggest lie, the biggest delusion in America is that anything or everything is free. So I do think that helps contribute to the delusions and the illusions around, middle class people, the average people, because this is what they're sold. Everyone believing they're going to hit it big, that they're going to win big, they're going to be the exception, right? And as the song goes, though, for every winner, there's 100 that die. And the reality is, people don't actually know what they're asking of themselves when they say, I want to own this, I want to run this, I want to do this, I want to have this. They don't actually realize the energy they're demanding. So when they fail and when they can't be persistent and when they can't keep it up and when they're easily discouraged and all these other things, and then they don't get what they want, you see that it easily embitters people, right? This is the idea of having. So therefore, if you don't have it, and it's popular nowadays, especially in America, to say, oh, if you don't have, it's someone else's fault. I know I'm critiquing our system and our way of life, but this is to be differentiated. I don't see anyone here is a victim in the sense that everyone was just born here, right? Like no one alive today invented this. No one alive today, hell, if only we had, I mean, this is imaginary talk, right? If only, right? This is like premise for fiction, right? It makes for good writing and storytelling. But you could say, if only people nowadays had the vision that the people who created these systems and things, if only anyone nowadays had any of that sense or ability or skill, and then to navigate it and implement it and do something about it, rather than just kind of, endless red flags and screaming. And, I guess the ship of fools will eventually wind up on the rocks as a result. But we're going to keep going. Relationships, they've been raised and bred in this culture. Oh, I did want to say that that was the biggest part of my critique is, that everyone was sold the fantasy, right? That everyone's going to hit it big, or that everyone can hit it big, when in reality, a lot of people who do have anything like money in this country, they actually build it slowly over time. And it's often not till later, especially for men, it takes a long time to build skill sets and a network and be of value to people in the world, and to be so generous as to kind of instantiate yourself into any kind of pre-existing system or thing, or whether you're building or doing your own thing. Either way, it's time and it's effort. And is what I mean when I say people don't understand, like they can't imagine doing it day after day, year after year, year after year, right? A lot of that's alone time, a lot of that's work, a lot of that's not sexy or cool, or no one cares. That's another way of putting it. If only Big Brother cared. That's kind of what I hear from like our politics. Like people want Big Brother to care, but he doesn't, and that's also part of the story. But let's keep going. Of it's all just paper dollars. So essentially, you got a bunch of mercenaries and prostitutes, and no wonder they're unhappy. No wonder they can't have relationships. There's this whole notion that tyrants can't have friends and slaves can't be friends. So when you have an entire, a majority, 99% population conditioned to be slaves and tyrants in varying degrees, to both be a part of, to be subjugated by a system, and to be try to rise up through the ranks to control and get into the levers of power said system, you see why Americans are the way they are. You see why they can't have relationships, because tyrants can't have friends and slaves can't be friends. When everyone's a slave to money, right? The guy who has $2 is 100% better and more valuable than the guy who has $1. And the guy who has $10 right up on down the list, and the guy who has $1 million, well, everyone beneath the millionaire is just subhuman. They just don't exist, right? And then right. So What new money doesn't understand, especially when they first hit it big, is how quickly it comes and how quickly it goes. Even if it didn't come quickly, the illusion that's sold, the fantasy that's sold, is that it does come easily. So I would suggest every American, for instance, to watch something like Behind the Music or look at um, pro athleticism in America, where you see that a lot of people, when you come from the bottom and you have no experience with money or how to make money or how to keep, I guess this is where it talks about, or this is where you get into keeping money and then making that money make money for you, because this is long how that's how business has really been done in Babylon, right? Like since day one, that's where the real money is. That model has not changed. And then because it's not just the money, it's like, there's a difference between currency and trading and then also just ledger money, which is kind of the model we've been working off for a long time. And the idea being that like you have a workhorse and you have assets, and between all this, you have a ledger of assets and debits and a model on which you can do business. But what about when everyone lies? What about when the ledgers read more than what they're worth, right? We see this in, saw this with all sorts of modern technologies where the value is falsely inflated outward. Oh, look, this is worth billions. And then it quickly shrinks back down in like a year or two later. Oh, look, this supposed $1 billion asset's worth a couple million. And they just sold it off, and it's been sold off 20 more times, right? Like this idea that we're constantly marketed the future, right? Is because a few people make a lot of money and these quick changing of hands of large sums of money. And then a lot of people are sucked up and wiped out by that. And old money has no problem with it, because remember, guys, we're dealing with matters of physiology here. It's a completely different experience to be born into a position of security, and very few people are. And sometimes, even if you are, it doesn't mean you're secure, because, as the American poets say, "Mo money, mo problems." And another way of phrasing that is rising complexity equals more problems, right? So to keep money is a lot harder than to just make money by trading your time for money, which is actually like that was, I think they called it slavery with extra steps, but I'm gonna keep going.
From the millionaire, but the millionaire is a flea to the people who own the place, right? The millionaire
Right.
doesn't like
House takes it all. House gets it back. This is why new money is often looked down upon, because most of the people know, like, oh, you're not going to last. Like, there's a reason why it's really hard for generational wealth to become a thing to be made, because it's really hard to weather the insecurity of the markets, of the people, of everything, right? So these things become really difficult, or um, just again, the class differences are huge. And to bring it to a different level, like Stanford biologist Robert Sapolsky, right? He's a famous biologist, about as famous as a scientist can be in an anti-intellectual culture like America. But excuse me, I got something in my throat. He said, his work focuses around studying security and insecurity in primates, and by measuring their stress levels. And sure enough, go figure, those at the bottom have a very different experience, right? They have a different bodily experience than those at the top. So those at the top of the hierarchy, they exist in a different realm, and it's far more secure and cut off and isolated than the one down at the bottom. So they're very different experiences, and they yield very different approaches to life, and then in our sophisticated civilization, money and market, right? So these are very complicated things that have to be dumbed down to the point of not mattering on the market, because we're buying and selling answers, and everyone wants it in pill form. Everyone wants the easy answer. How do you make money? How do you live? How do you love? How do you do anything? And everyone's quick to step in and sell an answer. And I'm saying enough of that to a certain degree here, but let's keep going.
The day, he's cheating on his taxes and he's doing all these other things.
Right. Everyone, like I said, everyone cheats in their own way. And you can see it whether you're reading an American autobiography or listening to someone talk. Everyone has to justify it because, they play the game. And I get it. You eat shit long enough, that when it's your turn, your turn. So you see that pretty much every American businessman and corporation does it. The moment they find their loophole, they will milk it, right? And, that's not even to speak for how many people in our well, I guess the recording gets into that. So in its time,
He's just waiting for the day for the state to come back and ultimately, or the
right? See it all the
corporation state,
time.
right? The people in the
People on
place,
their
they're going to
taxes,
come back and take what's theirs eventually. They always do, right? And this is why most
right?
families, most wealth, most everyone gets wiped out because who wants competition, right? Why is it so hard to compete? Because the people who own the place don't actually want competition. They're telling
Right.
you,
Why does Google need competition? Why does Amazon need competition? Why do the few people, the zombies who occupy like our Congress, like why do they need competition?
we don't need competition. They're essentially saying we don't need you.
Right. And that's been increasingly true with technology, with automation, and not to get on the AI train because I don't really care. It's just right. It's another technology. It's another thing. We'll see that and deal with that too.
Everyone's just a corporate slave to the system, and
Paper money.
they became really intelligent with this idea of non-bankruptable student loans, right? Now everyone who's stuck on that, because who has the jobs, right? It's the corporation state. So a lot of people, and it's more women than anyone else. It's like what we're going to see is demographics changing as we witness this. What it is it's going to be a population collapse, but
population collapse. So begin to parse this out. What does our system of goods and services look like on a longer time scale of less competent and trained and skilled people to do it, especially as more things are automated or disappear or change? We've seen a big corporate and model die off in recent years, and we're going to continue to see these things. And there's going to be the people who always fight to keep the old model, right? No, don't, right? Like I talked about MP3s in the music industry, how the music, how the corporation was as rapacious as possible with how much money it made off music and how little it gave artists, and then they fought to keep it that way. And when that didn't work, then they figured out, oh, $1 a song, and we could still keep most of the money. They just further devalued everything while keeping and taking as much as possible. And then they blow it when you see that so much of it gets blown, when so much of it gets wasted, when so much of it just disappears anyway, right? Like that's what our country's good. That's what happened in 2008. Just like in 1920, a lot of people who thought things were secure, thought things were stable, right? The bridges and bearings are stable, right? Nothing's in flux. This is like there's nothing so big that it can't fail, right? This will last forever, right? Reality comes back, like reality snaps back. So we're going to see more of this corporate die off, more of these models die off.
What you'll see is a lot of women are basically modern
Oh,
indentured servants.
yeah, and this
right?
isn't, and I'm not trying to like basically women replaced men as the primary workforce in a very real sense. Like men are still doing the majority of the like all the dangerous and necessary hard jobs. Like men still do majority of that stuff, right? But like the majority of other jobs, like men are out of education, men are hardly anywhere in a lot of places, right? So basically, it worked out well for the corporation state because it turns out you can pay women less. They don't usually negotiate as much. They're generally not as aggressive. They're a little bit passive aggressive often, but you can, it's like, you have your kind of order, and they're good troopers usually. They're good at following orders, and you see where they break bad too. Like on like you see it all the time where like okay, woman deputy runs off with inmate. Right, like she'll follow the rules until she meets that person, that man who whispers sweet nothings into her ears, and then she's gone. Right, so we see this behavior too. But at the same time, what I'm saying is that as the primary debt holders, as the primary consumers, because men tend to keep their money and women tend to spend it, right? And this goes back to, I don't know if you guys knew about this, but when men were more like the primary breadwinners, and then as our media culture changed over time, it was something like soap operas in America began to market to women like what Frank Zappa, musician, American musician, called Turgid Flux, which was a basically endless campaign of soap operas and related commercials to sell, bad romance and sex and, products and services. And anyway, it seems to my mind that the way that has shifted is social media has enabled every woman to kind of live that fantasy and produce that drama. So a lot of this stuff about coming out of our media and on like social media, you can find on YouTube right now, endless stuff about men and women having issues with dating and relationships. And a lot of like it was normal for a long time for men to live and die alone. In Babylon, in America, like, men lived and died alone as slaves. And that was always normal. And so like you go into a grocery store and you see these shelves of TV dinners, like who do you think that's for? That's for like the single lonely men who no one knows or cares about, right? And then what's going to be new is generation of middle class and average women doing the same, right? Formerly, oh, I guess a lot of, like people tend to have more kids at the bottom, less kids at the top, but we're going to see a lot of families and people like middle class families and people who otherwise would have continued on any kind of legacy, or like they would have at least had more kids and then tried to pass on a business or anything. We're just going to see a lot of people and things